an expert in poverty law on the civil side. Do we have any inmates from any of the prisons here? We're supposed to. Hopefully we had one or two. Anyone? Okay, I guess we don't. That's too bad.
I found a bit.
I think there'll be one in there.
All right, I would hope that someone would come in and ask some questions about the public defender system, corrections and prisons. Well, I think what I'll do at this point is just generally throw the group open to any questions or topics that you might want to talk about. Were there any questions raised by the main speakers which you like to have us discuss in greater detail, or any specific problems which we might be able to enlighten you on? I'll give you some background of what I do. I'm a clinical professor of law at the University of Minnesota. What this means is that I'm an advisor to the legal aid clinic. We have about 150 law students who are involved in all sorts of poverty law projects. The largest project we have is defending people who are charged with petty crimes in misdemeanor court in Hennepin County. And I attempt to get students involved with people who are poor and who are in the court system on a one-to-one basis. I'm attempting to make this a meaningful experience, and because most of the law students come from upper middle class backgrounds, few of them have ever seen the inside of a courtroom before they come to law school. A very small number of them will ever see a courtroom after they leave the door of the law school. Most of the students who graduate from our schools go into business, work with corporations, or do something else other than work in a criminal courtroom. We felt at the law school that it's extraordinarily important to involve lawyers while they're in school in the court system in order to give them some basic fundamental understanding of the problems that we have in that system. We hope that as they go out into life, we know that most of them aren't going to become involved directly in this criminal law work. We're hoping that as members of the Bar Association and things, that they will make some effort to correct the tremendous injustices which occur every day in our system here in Hennepin County. Bernie, why don't you tell them what you do, give them a little bit of background on what your organization does.
Well, I'm chief of litigation for the
I
legal.
don't think they can hear you.
Chief of that's never been a complaint I've written. Chief of litigation for the Legal Aid Society of Minneapolis, which is partially United funded and partially funded by the Office of Economic Opportunity Legal Services. My primary business is to sue institutions of government for poor people, poor groups of poor people. Basically, however, the office itself has a heavy caseload in domestic relations problems. We used to have a heavy caseload in juvenile problems. We're getting quite a bit lighter on that side now, having been relieved of our responsibilities in that area by the district court judges in Hennepin County for unknown reasons, I'll state at this point. Maybe Jewel knows better than I do. At any rate, I represent welfare recipients.
Why don't you try to move in from the back? Maybe we can close that off and we won't be interrupted by the people.
We represent welfare recipients in administrative proceedings within the welfare departments. We represent them in actions that we bring in federal court or in state court to change or enjoin particular practices of the state and local welfare agencies. We represent juveniles in delinquency proceedings, both at trial, and I have a number on appeal in the state Supreme Court. We represent allegedly neglectful parents, primarily in juvenile court proceedings. We represent debtors in actions brought by their creditors. Some of these actions are just, it's just a matter of accommodating the parties, and others it's a matter of cleaning up or attempting to clean up an area that has operated to the detriment of a significant class, an economic class of people. To do this, we have approximately 14 lawyers and 7 Vista volunteer lawyers, 4 devoted primarily to law reform, litigation, and group representation. The remainder devoted to both family law work, juvenile work, and the daily service problems that poor people have. Creditor-debtor problems, garnishment problems, run the gamut, any kind of problems, landlord-tenant problems. Some of them, few of them raising significant issues for immediate litigation, although many of them raising legal issues that can be tackled now, or a doctrinal bridge hopefully laid for attacking them in the future. As a matter of changing the course of the lives of poor people, I would say that we had a limited, very limited effect. To some degree, we can make it a lot easier, but we can't produce the money that makes people not poor. And consequently, we get, the better we do, the more cases we get, because we've opened up more areas of legal relief usually. However, we cannot produce the money to pay for the relief that we hopefully will be able to get. And consequently, we're on a merry-go-round, I sometimes feel. And that's basically what we do. But it's fun anyway.
Julie, why don't you give a group a background as to exactly what your court services department does, what your job is?
That it was announced earlier. I'm not sure that I need to elaborate on that. It includes the gamut of correctional services for Hennepin County, for probation, adults, juveniles, 1 correctional institution in the county home school, and the detention home, as well as domestic relations services.
Let me give you an example of how justice is administered in Hennepin County Municipal Court, or injustice is administered. Last Friday, we require all of the students at the university, in the clinic, to handle live cases, prepare for them, get to know a particular individual who's charged with a crime on a one-to-one basis. So I had a girl who had last summer been working with a prosecutor's office in Ramsey County, assigned to a case involving a young man, he's either 22 or 23 years old. According to, the man's story, and we believe it to be true, he and his friend had been shopping at a supermarket in North Minneapolis. They'd come to the meat counter, and they'd gotten into a discussion regarding whether or not our client should buy a piece of steak, 1 piece. The friend who was with our client said, bet him $5 that he couldn't get the steak past the cash register. It was sort of on a lark. Our client took up the bet to win the $5. He picked up 1 piece of steak, it was worth $2, put it in his pocket, back pocket of his coat. He walked past the cash register, became frightened. He dropped the meat before he got outside the store, and he was jumped on, arrested by the store owner and an employee just as he got to the last door before leaving the store. We were prepared for trial, and at 2:30, I was late getting down to the courtroom for some other reasons. At 2:30, I walked in. The student was prepared. She couldn't start the trial without me. The judge who walked in was a judge who we hadn't anticipated would be hearing the case. It was a change at the last minute. The testimony of the store employees was as I just told you. They observed the 2 people fooling around. They watched our client put the piece of steak in his jacket, and they arrested him, found the steak on the floor inside the store. The testimony of the defendant and his friend was as I told you. The legal issue was whether or not our client intended to permanently deprive the owner of the property. We felt that we had a very strong case showing that he didn't actually have criminal intent. It's true he walked past the cash register, but it's not true that he walked out and kept that meat in his possession. It's not true that he walked outside the store. The judge, after hearing the case, which consumed only about 45 minutes, and without allowing us to make a closing argument, found the defendant guilty. He then leaned over to the clerk and he said, does this man have any priors? The clerk said no, and the judge promptly sentenced the man to 30 days in the workhouse. I've handled almost 100 of these cases before, all types of judges. Never have I ever had anyone sentenced to the workhouse for stealing a piece of steak. This guy had been in the service for 3.5 years. He'd been in Vietnam. He was released in June. He had been working. He'd been ill. He wasn't working as of Friday. But now he's serving 30 days in jail on the basis of taking a piece of steak. What do you think about that? Do you have any feelings, or does that sound very logical to you? Do you see any injustice in that? Go ahead.
Isn't that cruel and unusual punishment? I mean, wouldn't you settle that in a small claims court, $2?
No, that's a petty crime. He stole it according to the judge's decision. You can get up to 90 days in Hennepin County for stealing a piece of meat. I've had people charged I had a fellow on Saturday who stole a 25-cent can of shoe polish. He didn't go to jail for it. I've had other people who've stolen as much as $300 and haven't gone to jail for it, too.
What would have happened if you had stolen the steak?
If I had stolen the steak, nothing would have happened. At the worst, I'd been placed on what they call a 609-135. I'm white, middle class, know how to talk. We don't have any problems with white middle class people. They all have jobs, so they're good risks for probation. We don't want to injure them in the future, because, especially if you're a student at the university and you happen to go out and steal something. We don't want to risk damaging your future because you're white and middle class. Therefore, we never put you in jail. We take great lengths to never have that conviction on your record. So we use what we call a 609-135. It's very easy with a white middle class person. At trial, in fact, when I have a student who is too poor to hire a lawyer, it's nice to go to trial with because he's smart enough to know how to tell a lie if he is lying. The people who are poor sound like they're lying to the judges even when they're not. It's very difficult to convince a judge. In this particular case, by the way, the judge said the reason he gave the kid 30 days was he didn't believe his story and he thought he was committing perjury, even though he couldn't prove he was committing perjury. So I asked the judge, well, should we have forced him to plead guilty? Would that have been better? Because you wouldn't have believed he was committing perjury. And the judge said, well, I don't know whether I would have or not, but it might have been better. Go ahead. Someone back there. Anything else? Don't you have any feeling about that?
What, was this a black man?
No, this was a white man. I have other problems with black men. Black men don't have jobs either. Therefore, they're poor risks for probation. A few judges will bend over backwards for black men, and more so than for white men. Most judges are insensitive to their problems.
Mr. Alfand, I happen to work at the workhouse as assistant superintendent.
Right.
Of course, we pick up this feeling on the part of individuals that are committed under circumstances such as that.
Mr. Swenson?
Yes, it's very, very difficult to give any assurance to a person because you may well feel that what he's saying is absolutely correct. Were he a person of some affluence, it would have been a different proposition entirely. And this is one of the real sticky propositions that you get involved in. We like to support the courts when we can, in good conscience, do this. But there are times when one has to listen very carefully and very sympathetically to this kind of interpretation. Frequently, they will say that. And I've been a person of greater means, and we certainly would not happen. Where is this so-called justice? It's a differential kind of thing. It's operating to my disadvantage.
Why? That's really not true, Ollie. I mean, for example, the judge operates from his sphere of experience. His sphere of experience tells him that people who are poor and out of jobs and have to find some way of getting the money with which to exist in this particular society do steal and are detected at it at a much greater rate, than white-collar crime, which means to him that there is a tremendous propensity on the part of a particular person who is before him to commit a crime. Thereby, he says, I'm going to remove him for a period of time to decrease that potential. Suppose he says that to himself. I mean, that's rational.
Oh, I presume there are 101 rationalizations you can make for the disposition of a given case. But what I'm saying is that it's a little comfort to to the person who is committed under those circumstances, who starts making comparisons with others that are in a more advantaged class in the community.
Well, that's an error, but to say merely because someone is in a higher economic socioeconomic class, and that's
They may use other.
you wouldn't want to give them the same sentence. Wouldn't you want individualized justice, right?
They may say, for example, I had a poor defender. Yes, they may say another attorney would have done better. Another judge would have been different. This is the kind of thing that you get involved in. I'm not saying that these aren't hard problems for the court to handle. This is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we pick up the backlash. Some of it is based on probably some pretty legitimate feelings as they compare their lot with someone else, and some of it is a constructive type of rationalization. We know this, but these are the realities that we deal with, and it's tough. It really is.
In our program, we are continually judge shopping. Had we known that this particular judge would have been on the bench Friday afternoon, we would have never gone to trial before him. We watch the calendar very, very carefully. We know which judges will hang our defendants and which ones won't. As a matter of protecting them, there are two judges where we will not plead a person before at all. We can either continue the case or set it down for a jury trial, or set it for a trial at a time when those two judges won't be sitting. Simply because, from our point of view, that's the protection our defendants must have. Because these particular judges are clearly out of line with the remaining members of the court.
But that's only a question of equality. I'd like to get to the substantive problem. Suppose a judge. Let's take a judge who is fair across the board, who is not the judge that you happen to be referring to. Oh, I happen to know, and I agree with you on. But judge sitting there, and he's convicted a man. I mean, he's found that the man is not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, and now the problem he has is sentencing the man. I mean, ought he to take into account the factor of potential risk that this person has as far as his future criminal conduct is concerned?
Certainly, the court services department.
I've been talking more than my share of the time this evening.
That's all right. We talk all day long.
Could, share
all right.
discussion at this point.
Come on, jump in.
I don't know what a judge would do finding a man not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt to proceed to sentence.
No, he found him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
I find that in my time, judges are being awfully understanding if you deal with the judges and the problems of the individual.
Where is this?
This is in Manchester.
What sort of clients do you have?
I have a lot of the ghetto clients from Dale Selby and a lot of juveniles before the juvenile courts. And I find that they're being awfully understanding if you approach them with the problem. And just today, I had a problem up in North Minneapolis that I didn't realize there was that much desire to understand the problem of an individual in society that I found within county attorneys and fire marshals and God knows what. And I think perhaps the problem is that we ought to look at the particular individuals who are sitting on the bench, who are obviously unreasonable in their dealing with the defendants. But as an overall picture, I'm finding great deal of cooperation among the judges.
So the problem isn't really inequality in the law itself. And the problem isn't really the way the court system itself is structured. It's the fact that we have significant or insignificant, I think probably significant, or number of judges who are, just either, if you want to call them, insensitive to the human frailties of other individuals, or are they, merely, bastards, to put it, bluntly. Is that the problem in really between poor people and the courts?
What I enjoyed, and the reason I wanted to sit here, I tried to work a little with Neil Riley in Hennepin County with amicus. And
why don't you explain a little bit more about what amicus is?
Amicus is, I have a felon down, who was down in Stillwater, who's now in the workhouse in Ramsey County, whom I visited while he is an inmate down in Stillwater, and see what I can do for him while he gets out of Stillwater. It's a friend on a one-to-one basis. I am becoming fairly good friends with this particular fellow. And but what interests me most is what happens in what you refer to as the dehumanization subsequent to conviction. And this, I think, is one of the deepest problems that you have in the whole penal system, is after you go through the slow grinding process of justice, and what happens to the individual when he becomes a member of an institution that's a law unto itself. But I assume I've never been fortunate or unfortunate enough not to have been at Stillwater or any other state penitentiary. But what happens to the individual subsequent to conviction? And what are we really trying to do to this individual? You were mentioning a man who is looking at 125 years and saying, what does he have to lose? I think is the term. What responsibility ought we as society to take to these people? What are we doing right and what are we doing wrong? And let's stop being wrong most of the time to these people. This is great interest in me. I'm not going to be a Clarence Darrow in the fighting of the cases. But
I'd like to feed in something else if I could. I've been reading a little bit.
Could you maybe identify yourself?
Oh, yeah. My name is Glenn Hangy, and I'm a clergyman. And I've been reading a little bit about some accusations made against the criminal court system, that its whole purpose is not to determine guilt or innocence, but its purpose is to extract guilty pleas on a mass production basis. And this seems to be borne out, I think, in Ramsey County, where 3/4 of the cases that go into district court never go to trial, but where there are guilty pleas that are induced by one means or another. And I was wondering, what does this do, those of you who are dealing with poor people, what does this do to people who are already conditioned to perhaps feeling inadequate because of their poorness or because of their situation as a minority race? What does this do to move into a system that really is very preoccupied with guilt rather than the determining of guilt or innocence?
Right. Let me make some general comments. I feel, first of all, probably 85 to 90 to 95% of everyone who eventually appears in a criminal court pleads guilty. The number of people who are entering pleas guilty is just extraordinarily high. Most of those people are guilty of a crime. There's nothing really wrong with that. Secondly, the poor people come in contact in Minnesota with the public defender system. This is a stopgap measure at best. It's a system where you have a small number of lawyers with a huge number of clients. It's a system in which the judges, could, if all the clients that came in and were represented by the public defender pleaded not guilty and requested jury trials, could bring the entire judicial system to a halt by itself. Poor people come into the system, they're locked in sort of inhuman conditions. They are not able to make bail. They're not released without bail because they don't have a job. They come in contact with if they're black, with a white person who represents the establishment. Because he's overworked and understaffed, the public defender spends only a brief amount of time with a particular client. He keeps, if he's part-time, as some of the felony public defenders are, he not only has got to keep his time down to a bare minimum when he's talking to the individual, but he's got to worry about his own private practice at the same time. So there are outside pressures which are forcing him to really move things along. The result of this very often is, and this is across the country, is that people who are poor come to distrust the public defender as a part of the establishment. They look upon him with distrust. Most of the time, they don't have any alternative in getting a lawyer. Now, and I think that very often they're justified in their distrust of the public defender. The lawyer makes very little effort to really communicate with this individual, to really try to do something about him. He's more interested in expediting this particular case as quickly as possible, rather than taking the individual and trying to really rehabilitate.
What does the lawyer know about that?
The lawyer knows as much as anybody else in society about what he can do for a human being. He can be a friend to a person who's a client just as much as anyone else in this room could be if they wanted to. If they wanted to take the time.
But anything else besides being a friend, Bob? Really?
Oh, lots of things. You can we defend people all the time who are alcoholics, who we win acquittals for. They leave the door. 2 days later, they're back in. We didn't do anything for them. We defend people who are addicted to drugs, win acquittals for them very often. That night or a week later, they're back in court. Same thing. I'm criticizing my office in particular, and we try to run the best possible office in the United States. We probably are right now. We have the highest paid full-time lawyers of any public defender system in the United States, and we have probably the best.
You better explain to them your system as
opposed
to the family public.
There are in Hennepin. There are a whole system of different public defender agencies in Minnesota. The public defender system for misdemeanors emanates from the law school. It's sort of a hybrid type of operation. It's funded by a bunch of grants. We keep very close statistics. We take all kinds of cases to trial. We appeal. Some of the judges hate us because we not only appeal, but we are in contact with the newspapers, and when it's really a bad case, we violate all the canons of ethics, and we might mention to a reporter that there's going to be an interesting case. He goes up and he sits in on the case, and when it takes the jury 20 minutes to reverse the judge below, or if we even waive the jury because we have faith in the particular district court judge, he writes stories about that. And he makes the municipal court judges look very, very bad. And we've had a lot of cases since we've been in operation over the past 18 months in which the district court has looked very, very bad. I've handled cases of eyewitness identification. 2 cases, in fact, where it took a jury 20 minutes to go out and come back and acquit the particular individuals, where the municipal court judges had convicted them below. Just was an open and shut case, but the municipal court judges, because there is, in my opinion, a presumption of guilt that pervades our lower court system rather than a presumption of innocence. When we go in the municipal court, we are very, very often forced to prove the defendant innocent, not that he's guilty. In lots of cases.
What percentage of cases does your office actually win by a jury trial?
We are winning at least 50% of all the cases we take to jury. That's we're much higher than that. We screen very carefully. We have a carefully plotted out screening system. For one thing, we watch which judges are sitting where, so we know which types of cases are going to be heard at which times, so we can get those particular cases before the right judges. For example, prostitution cases. Lots of judges simply will put a prostitute in jail for 30 days, while other judges will put the girl on probation for a year. So if we get a prostitution case, we look at the calendar, we see if it's going to be set for 2 weeks from now, we see who the judge is. If there's a particular judge that we don't want, we'll set it down for a jury trial. That'll mean 9 months from now. If it's a judge we can trust, we'll set it down for a judge to hear it.
I'd like to ask this fellow a question.
Sure.
What's your name?
Becker.
Bernie Becker.
Becker? I'm Jack. I noticed a while ago you mentioned something about judges being rational. Do you think it's best for a judge to be rational or judicious?
I don't know the difference.
Well, I mean, is there a difference?
Depends how you define it. I mean, to me, the majority of state court judges that I have come across, including the district court judges, are rational to a particular point. And that is the point where they think that their decision is going to be attacked publicly, where they begin to worry about what the taxpayers and the fine silent majority, the citizens, and the cops are going to think about what they have decided. And at that point, rationality and the law and how you might logically apply the law or change the law or move the law or read the law in court, not only with with the statutes itself and the case law, but with the Constitution goes out the window, and the decisions become one of expedience as to what is the easiest route for the judge to take.
Yeah,
And that's my own personal experience.
But
And,
why is this necessary? When a judicial system is supposed to be a judicial system.
because it's run by human beings, and we happen to have a particularly lousy lot of human beings operating it. I mean, I don't think I think that's the point I was trying to make before. You come down to it, what these gentlemen are talking about really is that they're saying that too great a number of the judges and other court personnel involved in the system are not really looking to see how can I be judicious, just, wise, and fair, but are looking, to wreak, if you will, or wreak society's vengeance upon a particular individual, who may or may not deserve it.
And this is why poor people are.
Well, poor people are down at the bottom.
Yeah.
Poor person, for example, and this is, I think I take issue with Bob as far as what most lawyers would be able to do. Suppose instead of an assigned counsel system or a public defender, instead of a public defender system, half-time, full-time, or otherwise, you had a system where every lawyer in Hennepin County had an obligation to take a certain number of criminal cases from municipal or district court a year, and he got paid at the going rate that lawyers get paid for in private firms. Let's say $35 an hour for the time he puts in, plus extra if he goes to trial.
Pick that up. For a lawyer, it's minimum $30 to $35
It's
an hour.
usually
Right
$100 an hour.
No, it's $35.
It's usually
That's the
for a good
billable
lawyer.
time. Well, maybe the hot shots,
$15,000 for a murder case.
to try it.
$5,000
Some cases,
for a little felony.
but if you get down to an hourly figure, for example, they figure it if they're going to have to do brief work or something like that, $35 an hour is probably the minimum. Yeah, and I agree.
Any
It may go
lawyer,
up.
whether he's had any criminal practice experience in
Oh, wait. Every lawyer in an assigned counsel system has to take these cases and will be compensated for them at the rate he would if he was representing a corporation, if he was representing the Rockefellers in a criminal proceeding, and he was being paid a fee privately by those people. It still seems to me that Bob is wrong, that we would not run up with people who could, in a sense, bring to bear the resources that he's talking about to assist the individual who probably is guilty, because the percentages of people who are proceeded against are amazingly high as far as their guilt is concerned. I mean, we're aware of that. Everybody's aware of that. That's only part of the problem. Guilt of what is the first thing? Is it something that ought to be considered a crime in the first place? I mean, it may be possession of marijuana. Should that be considered a crime? The lawyers, have very little concern about that. They have very little concern about many of these kinds of things. They have concern about processing numbers. I don't think most of the lawyers that I've come across would know what the hell to do in a criminal case, and not only as far as defending the case is concerned, but as far as what assistance they could bring to bear for a particular individual, assuming that individual wanted their help. And there's another thing. A lot of the individuals may not want a damn thing, and they may want to tell you after you're finished with them and you've gotten them off to go to hell, which is their perfect right as far as I'm concerned. And rather than be a social worker, as I've often said, my function, for an individual who doesn't want me stops at the point where I have, finished my legal usefulness to him. And I really don't think that it's a matter of numbers alone or anything else. It's a matter of the care, the concern of lawyers, of judges, of others, really, for what the system is doing, for what the value of people is. And until, that radically changes, and it may never, I don't really think we'll get very much better.
I'd like some feedback from some more people here. I mean, I've raised some easy issues. Let's not talk about judges for a while. Let's talk about lawyers. What in the world do you think about legal profession? Just a gut reaction. What do you feel about lawyers who charge $35 an hour? That's the price of justice, minimally. And as Bernie points out here, if you haven't been trained carefully in criminal law and done a lot of it, what you're going to do is sell your client down the drain unknowingly anyway. What do you think about that? Price of justice is going up.
I just have a question. You're a public defender and you represent poor people. How do poor people get referred to you?
Well, all right. Now we had tremendous when we first started. In the system wouldn't refer us poor people. We had, in fact, I still have to sit directly in front of the judges morning after morning after morning to ensure that there's a proper screening process that goes on. There are some judges who sit on the bench who will not refer anyone to the public defender. We have to pick them up outside in the hallway. The fact of the matter is, you may have seen a newspaper article where a month and a half ago we adopted a new policy after I went to the state Supreme Court, where we are simply picking up people who are poor, who've been passed over by the judges, instead of waiting for them to be referred to us, because the judges won't do it. Some judges simply won't appoint us. If a person has a car, any kind of a car that they can sell for $50, some judges say, sell the car. Just sell the car, regardless of whether they have anything else. Give it to a lawyer. If you make more than $3,500, some judges say, too bad. Go get yourself a lawyer. It's really a battle. And I'm out personally. I'm protected by the university. That's the only way I can operate in the way that I do right now. If I weren't protected by the umbrella of the law school, because if we were completely under the wing of the municipal court judges, I'm certain I would be quickly disposed of. We're too aggressive. We're really out there trying to create change.
Okay.
Is that?
Yeah. I work with poor people too. I'm working as a social worker in AFDC mothers who do not. Well, they deal with legal aid more, but in some cases they can't get legal aid lawyers, and they don't have money to get lawyers, and so they sit without.
All they have to do is call my office.
Yeah.
We have 3 phone lines now. We made a marvelous thing. We got rid of 1 phone line, got 3 phone lines. Took me a year to do that.
Domestic matters?
No,
Call Bernie.
I won't.
No, but there is some.
Call his office.
I'm finished with domestic
And I'll
matters.
tell you what, if you can't get satisfaction there, then call our office, because I have the students. As I say, we have 150 students. We'll take anything. Let me tell you a story about your department. I had a woman I got a story for about every department here, and it's not a very pleasant situation. I had a woman who was charged with prostitution, first time. A very nice woman, AFDC mother. She needed the money, she said, because she couldn't convince her caseworker that she needed extra money to live by. She was very frightened down there. She needed a friend desperately. I called the AFDC office, and I talked directly to her caseworker. Her caseworker told me, I'm sorry, we have a rule that we never go into court, we just won't get involved. I thought that was a pretty shoddy way to operate from my own biased position. And I've called the Bureau of Indian Affairs to try and help Indians. I've called AIM. I have called, you may have seen Jim Klobuchar's article on the Bloomington business, where a minister tried to get 15... Yeah, all right, where he went through all these agencies. I've done the same thing. Each agency passing me on to someone else.
Can you subpoena them?
Oh, I could, sure, I can subpoena them to come in and stand there, and that certainly isn't the help I need. The woman needs a caseworker who is concerned with her total problem, who really wants to get out and do something. You know, this is really terrible. We've institutionalized, in my opinion, so much of what we're doing that the people working in these little sectors believe, as Bernie put it, once I had been useful as far as a lawyer, forget it, the hell with him. Let him go on being an addict or a drunk. But I've done my days, my hours labor for him. I think that's wrong. But all of you in this room are allowing it to go on, and most of us are participating in the thing. And we're not doing anything. We have burned all the bridges, practically, that we ever had with the minorities in Minneapolis. Bridges that were built, were standing 10 years ago, have been basically burnt in the last 5. And they haven't been rebuilt, from my observations, despite all the efforts of a lot of people who've been trying.
Bob, you suffer from the same problem that half of the judges suffer from. You think being poor is an illness.
No, I don't.
Poor people need help. That's what this lady's in the business of selling. So is that. Right. That's what the poor people need help. They need money. That's what they need.
All right, we'll take money.
Individuals, poor, rich, middle class, any other need help in the sense of psychological help, training help, other kinds of help, whatever it may be. It has nothing to do with being poor.
Well, the problem with being poor is you got the agency that's set up, and the agency refuses to come in and provide the service that it really could provide. If it
What service do you think this agency could Here's a lady from the AFDC.
Go ahead.
Are you a
Depends on-
caseworker?
Yes, I am.
A field caseworker or an
Yeah.
intake? Field caseworker.
This means I go out and talk to people in their homes.
Now, do you know that you're not allowed to do that unless they specifically consent?
Well, that's why I go. They usually call and invite me out.
Okay.
Why don't you speak louder?
No, but what you're saying is that, okay, poor and money matters and social services. All I was going to say was our agency, welfare is that way. We deal with public assistance and we try to deal with social services. And at the point that we're at right now, we do very little on the social service end of it, and we try to appease people with a little bit of money every month and keep them down maybe. But what do you
mean keep them down?
Well, just keep them in their places. I mean, if they have this much money to pay their rent and they just sit at home.
Think social services will help them?
Social services may help because I think that the problem with the poor is not only money, and coming July, social workers like myself, and there are a few others here, will be freed of the public assistance end of our job, and we will be doing social work. Maybe by that time, even court services can refer, some of their problem cases to Hennepin County Department of Social Services. Perhaps. I hope.
What are you going to do for a family, few kids? No, just a minute. Well, this is the field I work in. He works in the criminal side. I get them before they become criminals, right?
I get criminals also.
None of my mothers are criminals.
Yeah.
There is no such thing as fraud in AFDC.
I don't mean that.
Welfare demonstrators. I got them all acquittals. We don't have any.
Right. I mean, what? For example, you take. Here's the typical AFDC case involving a poor family. Marginal family, husband, wife, couple of kids. Papa's making between $5,000 and $6,000 a year. Papa says this is too much for me for whatever it is. He doesn't like Mama anymore. The kids are getting too much for him. He's drinking whatever it might be, and off he goes. Okay, Mama's left holding the bag with the kids, right? And there she is. She doesn't have any skills. She doesn't have any particular inclination or interest in going out, to work. She wants to raise the 2 or 3 kids that she has, right? What can you offer to her besides money?
Well,
a hand, a helping hand. I mean, it's nice to be a friend. I don't mind that.
no, fine. I have a lot of people like that. And a lot of people I'll go out to and in talking with them, I'll find that they'll say, yeah, I love to sit around home, but my kids, soon they're all going to be in school and then I'm going to sit around home alone. And I don't really like the idea of sitting around home alone. What can I do to get out of my house? And I'll say, well,
what can we tell?
Join maybe a mother's group. We have mother's groups all around.
Send out a flyer to do that, saying these are the following things you can do if you don't want to stay at home when the kids go to school. I mean, what are you going to do as a social worker besides an information referrer?
Well, that's a big part of my job.
Did you take any graduate training in social?
No.
All right, let's get the social worker up.
Brittany must have something in mind.
All right.
Yeah.
You want to
You're trying to
proceed
get
there?
Yeah.
No, my problem is that I think that we have a limited amount of resources in the society, admittedly, and we're not going to devote, given the way things are in the world, we're just not going to devote that much of the resources to providing, if you want, true social casework services for individuals, be they in a probationary service after conviction, or be they poor people, or be they mentally incompetent people, or be they mentally ill people. Now, it seems to me that we ought to structure the administration and delivery of social work services in such a way that we maximize the effort of the few that we have, doing intensive work with those that are going to do something about it, instead of creating a fiction that everybody who's poor, or everybody who gets involved with the law, or everybody who's in trouble somehow needs a social worker. That's not true.
That's not what I'm saying, though.
Well,
You're agreeing with me.
No, because, yeah, I agree. What we're going to do, hopefully, is that people who are on public assistance will not have a social worker unless they want one and request one. Even if a landlord were to call up and say, I have an AFDC mother, and she's not paying her rent, what are you going to do about it? We'll say, well, what do you do about your other people?
I'd like to pick this up where it is and carry on for a
Where
little
did we
bit.
get Julian somehow?
I think historically, we went through a phase of recognizing a problem as that of an individual. He needed rehabilitation. And when I went to school of social work, if you weren't a psychiatric social worker, you just weren't anything. And you had to do the hocus pocus and change them. And there was really very little emphasis on changing the situation in which a person lived. And then a revolution took place, and we kind of forgot that individuals need help too, and we addressed ourselves to the system. It's this lousy system we had. We could change the system, well, that would cure all our problems. And so everybody jumped on the bandwagon, including the people who were in trouble, saying it's that lousy system. It's not my fault. It's not my problem. It's that system. That's the problem. It seems to me that there's some truth in both, that we have to look at the individual and the system. And some people, regardless of how many opportunities that we may provide, may need some help in taking advantage of the opportunities. But as a major thrust in curing the problem we're talking about, and I really hesitate to say this because I know corrections and courts need help. I know there needs to be reform. But someone earlier in our discussion quietly said in reply to a suggestion that I think you said you didn't know what it was like to be in a prison. Somebody over here quietly said, "Have you ever been in a public school?"
I said it.
And,
I said it. And I mean
were
it.
you the one?
I mean it.
Okay, now I thought you might carry that further, because there's a good possibility that if the bulk of our people who are now caught up in the corrections process, that they might be siphoned off if we had a more adequate educational and employment system. And then the reservoir that's left, which would maybe be reduced. Art Pearl and Wiseman, who wrote New Careers for the Poor, think it could be reduced to 10% of what it is. And then we'd spend our time working with that 10%, and the rest would be able to plug into the social system as adequately functioning people. Now we could spend 3 more days talking about what it would take to reform our educational system and tie it together with new employment practices so that people who are caught on the other side of that very widening chasm, not this group. We're so well off we don't even know how well off we are. But with technological change taking place so rapidly and the cost of education being so great, I can hardly afford to send my own children to college. Olaf got there first, and he can hardly afford to send his. Yes. He's warning me. Yes. Poverty is ahead. How about poor people? How are they going to get their children in? And we know that the way things are going, the data is there, that you have to get an education in order to be able to contribute. Now, if this is the case, then increasingly people are going to get discouraged, feel hopeless, helpless, withdraw to alcohol or to offensive kind of conduct, which we might refer to illness or you got a problem. But it's really symptomatic of a whole culture that's getting into trouble because of not being able to provide adequate opportunity within the educational system that we have, which does not provide for human development. It pours knowledge autocratically given into a few heads who can stand up against it. I have a bright daughter who is bored to death too. Even for her, it's a prison. And she can hardly wait to get out fast enough. Now, to kids whose parents aren't encouraging them, what happens to them? Well, 40% drop out. And then how do they get a job? The employment requirements, a high school degree, and so forth, a college degree pretty soon. So we're generating a big, huge problem, and it's not just the increase in population that's going to generate more heavy court loads. It's a society that's requiring increasingly degrees as the credential to get in. And the chasm between the have and have-nots is growing. It's not growing small.
Actually, what you're getting at, I think, is the real basis of the problem. That's North Minneapolis. It's going to be all of Minneapolis in 10 years if we don't do something about it. We're developing a subculture in which people learn and live in a criminal type of world. Everyone is stealing from everyone else. Very few people have fathers. The landlords get all they can. They're absentee landlords, live in the suburbs. Anyone who has any decency at all, according to white middle-class standards, has moved out of the city. And we're creating a situation that just lends itself to the creation of a real subculture of criminals by white middle-class standards. We're not doing anything about it. We've got the large towers where we put lots of blacks all together to be sure that each one gets the values from the other. And the schools are the poor schools. The teachers can't wait to get out of the ghetto area. It's too tough on the teachers. My wife did practice teaching in one of them. She didn't like it. Most everyone else that I've talked to can't wait until they're promoted in the school system to get out of there.
How many educators are there in the group? Okay, now we have some experts in the group. I used to be in education, so I'll be with you for a moment. Would you say that even the, quote, best schools are very good?
I don't think so.
Yeah, St. Louis Park.
Yeah, right.
Any better?
Minneapolis says if we only had the money Edina had, we could have good schools. I don't think the Edina schools are good schools.
Well, but
there's hardly a good school.
Can I ask you a question? What appears to you to be the primary purpose of schooling and administration of public schools today?
To sort of program the individual, to put him into a mold.
And this is the way that we've done it for years and years, and are still doing.
My experience is that from what I've seen, and we've handled a lot of school cases. Matter of fact, we're going to argue a school case tomorrow morning up in the state Supreme Court on some kid that got thrown out of high school for smoking cigarettes in a bathroom twice by himself, and we got that enjoined by, thank God, an enlightened district court judge in Hennepin County, and they ordered him to put the kid back at school, and the school board and the school principals and the Association of School Board and the Association of School Principals and 14 other groups of educators have all appealed to the Minnesota Supreme Court. And the main problem that they have, and this has been across the board what I found in other school cases over here, is how do we maintain our authority and discipline over the students? Not how do we educate, how do we make learning exciting, how do we interest kids in the world, in books and language, whatever it might be. The first and foremost, and they stated in the brief, and I was appalled when I read it, the first and foremost problem of the administrative public education is how to maintain their authority and a discipline over the students. My God.
See, educators are really, the good educators are very honest about this, and at national meetings, I always go to the education meetings where I hear this said. They agree with you that today's schools must be revolutionized, and if we were to do that, it would not only help our children, but also we could capture some of the kids from poverty who maybe could be given a job helping a slower student or a younger one. We'd have smaller classes. The whole new careers concept could be workable with a few $1 billion.
But your average middle-class parent likes school.
That's exactly right.
And doesn't the average middle-class parent get his child through school? And the ghetto child doesn't make it through school, he doesn't get that ticket?
Right, and that's what the middle-class parent wants. He wants that ticket.
Well, isn't it the responsibility of the educators then to get the ghetto child through? to work harder, to do things different. Why worry about Edina and the rest of those schools when your real problem is in the ghetto?
I don't think that we're helping the ghetto kid by, putting them in our mold.
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm asking you, what are you doing to get him through school? Since you admit he's...
Myself, I'm speaking as a parent
Okay.
now, actually, rather than...
Now, see, I don't think that teacher or any other teacher alone can do this. It will take billions of dollars in addition to another education for most educators to do it. And while we focus on educators and hold them responsible for all that's wrong, just as with the courts, we look to the judges, what's wrong with them. Really, judges are political animals, and if you'll take an interest in the court and start visiting there and sound off about what is going on and want better service.
If you can see the injustice, the major problem I have is that an injustice, a gross injustice, can be occurring in the front of a white upper middle class law student, and he won't even see it. He won't even know it exists. And I've had...
If we had to depend on a silent majority to open their mouth, we're in bad shape.
The problem with the League of Women Voters monitoring the courtroom is they can't spot the injustice. That's right. They're so unfamiliar with the system. They can see a judge up there who's selling every other guy down the river and who is being totally unsympathetic and insensitive to what's going on about it. And no one will pick it up.
You're talking about as if justice and ethnic background has anything to do with it. As I've gone through this stage, it has nothing to do with racial background, in my opinion. Maybe I'm naive. I'm a European. I came to this country to study, and I got sort of hung up here. And they don't have the kind of law we got back home, all this stuff. And as I've seen around the country, it's the group that you belong to economically that is going to determine the quality. What you are referring to as the psyche of the individual being insecure, the frightened, the scared, the defenseless. This is the fellow, whether he be an Indian, black, or a German immigrant, or Norwegian immigrant, or Norwegian living up in between Detroit Lakes and Park Rapids in the stick country, I call it. These are the people that the sheriff are going to pick on. These are the people that are going to fill the county jails. These are the people that are going to be processed into the workhouses. It has nothing to do with ethnic background. It has to do with these are defenseless people.
It's poverty.
This is poverty people, and this is not unique to any one group in this country. This is unique to a lot. There are millions and millions of white poverty-stricken people as there are black poverty-stricken people. And these are the people who are confronted with an authority, a kind of a sick pyramid that you were describing in your talk. They are confronted, and these are the people upon whom the authority can prey, because they are not going to come back. This is not a battle with a physician out on Lake of the Isles who finally is recognized as having an identity. These are people who have no defense. These are people who don't even get the benefit of the public defender, because when the poor people or the Indians are picked up in Fort Pierce, South Dakota, and they're put out in the streets on Sunday morning to sweep the streets, they're done. These are defenseless poor. And I don't like these racial overtones in the justice distribution, because these are the poor people, and they have the one thing that poor people have in common is the injustice under a system. And I think the system has to be looked at, that the people who administer the system, there is something awfully wrong.
Isn't there something...
And you are talking about lawyers earning $35 an hour.
Minimal.
If I earned $35 an hour, 8 hours a day, I'd probably be in the French Riviera this time. Unfortunately, there's a great deal of time given away. But one problem came up, and this is one of the problems that are saturating in society today, is the inability of the man who is handling the matter to process and give time to the individual case in the amount of time that case needs. This is the individual because your municipal court judge has to. He has to detach himself because he knows that he's going to hear 75 to 100 to 150 cases. And first comes a line of 25, what is known to the community as the drunks. And he's got to just, if he knows them, he knows that, well, he can send Joe back on the street, he can send this man before the committee, and he'll send these up to the work farm because the work farm needs, because it's harvesting season. And if there is a plumber and he has a call from the man up at the workhouse that they need a plumber, of course the plumber is the one that gets 180 days. He's going to put it in good shape. It is something in the background that is wrong, and it's difficult to pinpoint the individual. But you're talking about education and the disrespect for teachers. When I went to high school in Europe, we had the utmost of respect for teachers, but we were weeded out academically. When we went to high school, we did it purely through competition. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, but there was a great deal of opportunity left for the non-academic students. There were the vocational schools, or there were the fellows who went to sea when they were 13 years old. That is appalling to you people, but my God, they're captains by the time they're 24, and they're fairly solid citizens. There is something wrong in back of the system, the way they treat a particular group of individuals. If we were to go up to the workhouse in Ramsey County or Hennepin County today and take a cross-section as to where did these people come from, however many there are, these are the defenseless, the frightened, the psychically fragmented people who have been the victim of the hand of the authority who needs this to satisfy his own sick psyche.
Well, that's what I asked earlier.
Defensive judges. Just one defense of them.
Yeah, and I was going to.
Part of the reason why they do what they do, of course, is being inundated with cases. But I've seen some compassion too. And I have heard men say, who are on that bench, I would be even more compassionate if I thought I could get away with it. It's the public out here and its expectations that's one of the problems. They have to get elected again. And if they put too many people back on the streets, they'd be accused of being soft-headed as well as soft-hearted. And they're afraid they would not get elected again.
Every time.
So part of the problem is the community.
Yeah, it seems to me that part of the problem are the people we've attacked the social workers, the teachers, the lawyers, and the judges. I think there's a more basic reason that we haven't. That you began touching on. You did too. Something inside all of us. Anybody feel that?
I'd like to throw in a new profession, which will be relevant by learning all this.
The account?
No, it doesn't look like one. I'm an economist, and
pretty.
I'm also a lawyer, but I like to point out the following fact that I'm very simplistic about this because I can afford to be simplistic here, since I don't have to be professional defensive about it. It seems to me that you are saying that one, the system is working very well for middle class people. You may take issue with that, but generally that's what you're saying. The solution then to me is that either you make everybody middle class, or you mete out a different system for the ones who are not middle class. If those are the two options, and since we are stuck with the original dilemma of the law that everyone is equal under the law, you cannot mete out according to a different system. You are left with a proposition of bringing everybody up to the middle class level. This, however, is not possible. But middle class, by definition, means that there's one above and one under. So in the end, you cannot bring into a unique class system as such. You're stuck with the problem of always having an underclass. It's always a matter of relativity, socially speaking. Now, if that is the case, if we are stuck with a problem that is by its nature insoluble, then I think you have to face an insoluble situation with a completely radical, completely new way of thinking about it, instead of going at it in a logically impossible way. It's that new way of looking at it that I haven't heard, that I was hoping that my European colleague over here might bring some insights into, or whatever whatever else has brought the professional consciences here tonight. And that's what I think is the issue, personally, societally, and for those of us who are concerned from a very professional point of view.
Let's have some comments from the ladies back here. Want to say anything? What are you thinking?
Don't answer that
Go
question,
ahead.
Robert.
Does
Now
anyone
you have
have
to
a
defend
solution
yourself.
to that impossible problem?
Okay, I've been bothered through all of this by diagnosing. That's all I hear,
Right.
Everybody diagnoses beautifully, and every paper I've read is diagnosed. But we haven't said anything concrete here either. Like what are we going to do about the schools? We talk about billions of dollars, but what are we going to do? Where are we going to start, and what's our role in it? And another problem I have is with this court thing. Like, if you're trying to bring about change, why are you going through the calendar to see when the judges that you're not going to get a good deal with, they're going to be on, and then ignoring them? That's not confronting.
Well, primarily because I'll just send my clients away. I'm not going to change them no matter what I do.
Well, yeah, but see, that's the way we all feel. That's the problem with apathy is that you don't feel you're going to do anything, so you ignore it. But I don't think.
Well, all right. Would you suggest that I be a revolutionary? That's a good comment. What should I do? Be held in contempt? You saw what happened in Chicago when a political trial.
All right, maybe you should. I don't know, but I don't think that ignoring the
Well, who will support me if I am?
I will sign a petition to get you out.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll also represent you. Probably get thrown in the same time.
Go ahead.
If you ignore those judges, they're going to sit there and do the same thing, and not everybody is coming to you. And you're checking through the calendar for it. A lot of people are still going to get those judges. What are we going to do about that? We have a responsibility to attack that problem.
That's right.
What percentage of people? What percentage of people in this society do you think can really move the system, society, the legislature, whatever label you want to put on, to change itself, to change things, to change the way it treats people? What percentage of people do you think really have to get together to do it?
Depends on your status. It doesn't have anything to do with percentage.
Suppose it's a matter of.
If the young revolutionary college students get together, they're weirdos, and it doesn't matter what percentage of them are doing it. It's status that counts right now. Okay, Agnew goes around and calls anybody with a beard and a name a weirdo. All right, they're not being listened to.
Well, what do you suggest?
What do you suggest? You haven't suggested anything all night.
All right.
Not a thing. And you've been sitting here. You and your generalizations really make me sick. I'm sorry, but
go ahead.
You've just been generalizing left and right about judges and lawyers and educators and blah, 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 and everybody's insensitive.
They are.
I will make a suggestion.
Go ahead. No, let her finish.
This is good.
You got more things. All right, and
This girl off a camp for the first time tonight, and you're going to stop her, Julie?
this is just a narrow part of it, but you brought in this thing about you've been talking about insensitive people and people that aren't concerned, lawyers and judges. And all right, and you've been ignoring the ones that aren't concerned by bypassing them.
Right.
And what I'd like to know is what's your solution to this? How can you promote people to get into the legal profession who are sensitive? And how do you decide if they're sensitive? And do you think you'd be sensitive? And you just gave reasons over here why you can't have those kind of people because they're in the political image. Well, you haven't given me any solutions. And not that, I don't
Okay. All right. First solution at the law school has been to involve upper middle class students directly with the poor in as meaningful a way as we can at the law school. Bring home to them the difficulties of the system. And let them really deal with a poor person for the first time in their lives. We think that maybe doing that might somehow change their attitude, might do a little bit for them after they graduate, so that when they assume the privileged position of power which lawyers occupy, they will think about that person that they had in municipal court. When they get in the legislature, they will appropriate funds so that we can have a sufficient number of public defenders so we can have just minimal justice for those people. That's one solution.
Do they get the good judges too? Is that the way they're working it?
Second solution. We are not going to be able to replace, I'll answer that. No, we are not going to be able to replace these judges by running against them as a political matter and getting people who we believe are very sensitive. What we have to do, judges were law students first, lawyers second. We've got to try to get them, make them as sensitive to the problems when they're in school So when they get out and they are a lawyer and become a judge, they will hopefully have carried some of this, some understanding with them.
All right, what you
All right?
just said proves the fact that you can't solve big problems by just attacking the whole problem at once. You're starting in school. You're starting with 150 students or whatever you're working with.
It's all the
and it's
graduates,
small.
yeah.
All right. Then all night here you've been talking about we got to change the education system. We got to change everything.
Yeah, but that's
Right.
starting pretty
All
small.
right, and you start small, and you haven't been talking about starting small.
We haven't been talking about starting at all.
That's right.
Right.
We've been describing and diagnosing.
Right. Once I think we see the problem, maybe we can do something about it. The law profession, until 1963, never gave people who were charged with serious crimes, except for murder and rape, free lawyers. You used to go to trial without a lawyer until 1963.
I think you got to understand there's been an amazing amount of change. Even, let alone the rules of law, which now provide, for example, that felons, accused felons, can get free lawyers, or also provide that the United States government puts in $60 million a year in providing free civil legal services for people. I mean, as of 1965, that wasn't the case. The municipal court judges that we're talking about, out of what, 15, 14 judges who are 16, who of whom and 3 years ago, 13 were crud. We've moved around and we've gotten down to maybe 9 or 10. And of the 9 or 10, 2 that are really, really bad, maybe 3.
Right.
All right. Now that's a tremendous change. I didn't know whether you still included them or not. I haven't practiced down there in a little while. Now that is a change. It's changing only our bailiwick, the legal system bailiwick. The welfare system, for example. Up until 1 year ago, people who came from one state to another state were poor, couldn't get a penny, right? In most places. Up until a short while ago, and maybe in some places even still today, people who are about to be terminated from public assistance don't have a right to a hearing. Now, those are small changes, but unless you're ready to say that what we have to do is just turn the whole thing upside down, and revolutionize to the extent of saying now the underclass will take over, whether they, the poor, black, and the young, right? As Spiro says, they will now become the ruling class, which I think holds as many ills and evils for me, personally, as this present system. You're gonna have to follow, the tack of doing small things as you go along.
Oh, I'm all set to do
All right.
small
Let me tell you what we've done. 1967.
Come along.
1967.
A social worker.
We got the right to counsel in all criminal cases in Minnesota. Revolutionary. We're one state in 5 yet in the entire United States that allows that. In 1969, because we were watching for the test case, we got a case that with the Supreme Court to say that a poor person, just like a rich person, could appeal his case from municipal court to district court. 1969. By 1972, we're going to have a staff of 10 lawyers down there. We're going to have an investigator or 2. By God, we're going to have justice whether the judges want it or not. That's what we're going to do. How do you go ahead? Hold it.
Personally, I feel a little bit snubbed since I wasn't attacked, and I like to.
Right. How the hell are we going to produce more goods and services for people that, right?
Now let me then provide the quote solution unquote from the economist's point of view. This solution is powerful from this perspective, because if you remember the American Medical Association and other humanitarian outlets in this country was against things like, say, group practice until they discovered that it paid to have group practice, in which case it changed the points of view and everybody was in favor of it. They were against Medicaid until they realized that it paid doctors to be in favor of Medicaid, and so on. Now, this is I'm not directing this as an ethical judgment. I'm directing this to the point that it actually does pay to eradicate poverty. In other words, it costs too much to have. Discrimination alone, cost this country about $20 billion in goods and services that it could have produced. Now, it so happens that if you go at poverty from this kind of inane perspective, which only economists or people who are trained in astronomy, I think, can do, you have the paradoxical situation that not only, say, a guaranteed annual income, which doesn't solve, say, the dope problem and all the other things, but it solves a lot of problems. The guaranteed annual income not only pays for itself, but reveals itself with a profit, which is incredible. In other words, you will take more in as a result of the taxes generated by the multiplier effect than you paid out in the first place, which very few people know. and those who know are keeping tight mouth about it. So we're going to get them elected if they are Republicans, and the Democrats are totally co-opted here by the Republicans.
Why want to get them
That's the interesting problem. I agree about that, and I've tried to sell aspects of training welfare mothers and the incentive program, income incentive, and what people keep coming back to, even though I try and explain to them how economically it's a far sounder and it's going to cost you less in the long run, is, by God, there's something morally wrong with that. People shouldn't be getting something for nothing.
Oh, but we subsidize everyone in this country.
Wait a minute. That's right.
So that, I don't...
No, but the problem is not your problem as an economist in understanding the finances of it or the economies of it. The problem is all of ours as a political matter. And how do we tell the great silent majority, 70% of the people who truly out there who truly believe it? I'm serious. They believe it, and they act upon those beliefs, and that's why the judges don't do the things that they really could or ought to do, and they're afraid of contaminating the world or the society with people by letting them out, by providing that systems whereby people convicted in the courts can learn trades or go to school or do other kinds of things rather than go back into institutions time after time. Now, how do we accomplish that? Which is the hard problem. I don't know the answer.
Let me address myself to my fellow Messiah over there, because we both had the same drive. For 3 years, I was teaching this to graduating seniors at the University of Minnesota, and they were out there. They were in Watts, they were in Puerto Rico, they were in the slums of New York. They were reporting back to the ongoing course what worked and what didn't work. They were attacking the schools, the health system, whatever, at broad basis. There are still about 150 of them out there. So what happened? Now, this is in 1964. That's 6 years ago now. And I'm beginning to get letters of the first pioneers out there. And let me tell you that it's a very harassing experience because nothing works really, and I had to revise the course every damn quarter. It's just a very harassing thing to do, which is why I don't do it anymore. These people, after 6 years, are writing me, and the 5-year people are coming in. And they're very dejected people. They are people who are now on their ways out to suburbia saying that I did my part. That's right. And I can enjoy myself.
That's right. I suffer from those pangs every month when the bills come due.
And that has dejected me when it comes to the individual. I think it is more for our own sake that we go out and do the small things, not for the poor.
That's right.
Now, if the war on poverty is for us, so that we can take out our middle class guilt feelings or whatever else, hangouts we have individually, or pure messiahs like you and I, or like you. We are then not approaching it the way that will settle it, and finally. So, like Hitler, I talk about the final solution to the poverty problem. It's not the one that I thought it was. The experience that I had, doesn't reveal that to me. So what I'm betting on here is to go at it with the American capitalistic way, and I'm safe here because I'm Norwegian, and of course, whatever I say you can discount as complete hogwash. I don't know from abroad. Is to make sure that eradicating poverty, eradicating bad health, pays. And not only does it not pay, but it pays enormously. As a matter of fact, the rates of return here are just astounding. Now, very few people are aware of this. For example, now that to save a human life on the highway costs about $9.75, which is another of those inane projections, which is buried in Washington. We know that the return on school training programs, if we have the motivation, 2, the opportunity structure, and 3, the training that fits the opportunity structure, has several 100% return. Now, if we can make that an issue and show on black ink on white paper that this is what it costs to eradicate poverty, this is what it costs not to do it, then there is a hope somewhere.
And just
My turn.
All right.
Boy, that almost
I
knocked
give
it
her-
out of my head. Well, I think we finally got a slogan. It pays. And we've reached a partial solution. And I think that the next question is, how do you reach the poverty people who don't realize that they have equal rights to justice and equal rights to education and equal rights to a reasonable income? How do you educate the general electorate, and how do you educate the power structure, which I guess is a very small portion of the general electorate?
But I'd like to add one other thing. How long can society afford to wait to do this?
Oh, society always makes enough adjustments to keep going. I'm convinced of that. You know, the world doesn't stay the same, and the system will not stay the same. It'll make just enough accommodations to keep from splitting apart.
Do you agree with that? Do you agree with what he says? He says we're okay. Just keep going.
He's not saying that. He's not saying that.
He's saying we'll make the adjustments.
No.
Huh? All right, what's he saying?
He's saying that society does, you know, throughout history, it self-adjusts.
It co-ops
maybe
radical.
times.
That's what it does.
No, I think that you make a beautiful point in terms of reminding us that we do what we can do. And I know that both of these gentlemen here do their bit. I've seen them do it. Fight hard and make their contribution. But over and beyond that, it's going to take a lot more than that to save us from a very difficult road ahead. And some of your comments really have appealed to me, but it needs to go beyond just giving. A guaranteed income is only to give us lead time or save our necks until we find a better solution. Because people, the human being, isn't satisfied to just receive. It isn't our nature. We have to be able to contribute too, which means that we have to be able to work, and to work we have to have an education. And it goes back to that.
The old work
that's
ethic.
going to require a lot of money.
Jewel,
I'd like
I
to
have
hop
to
on this
disagree
education.
with you too. I
Yeah,
really do.
you know,
All right.
so this is what the big hang up every time. What's your status? What's your status? What's your rank? You know, it's education. And I think a person can be beautiful and can do his thing, and he doesn't have to be educated.
In a technological society.
Yeah, in a certain way, but the
in
way
our
we...
society it takes it. You can't go out and
Why can't
push
we
a cart or plow a little farm.
But I think they're doing it, and I think we need cart pushers. Really. The thing of it is, we don't say that they're important. You're not important unless you've got a degree.
Yeah. To be able to have a vocation like a plumber and be honorable. Now, those are the guys who are going to Florida this year.
See, but they think of themselves as being honorable, and we allow them to do. The poor person who's the cart pusher, not the plumber, doesn't think of himself as being honorable, and we don't allow him to think
I've
of
been waiting all night for
There you go.
someone to say you gotta, what the young people are saying, you gotta love everybody. That's the only thing that's missing in this whole thing. You know, you love somebody, you know, you love him for doing.
Can you love someone who doesn't work? I keep hearing work and education.
Yeah. No, I think the general public can't love somebody that doesn't work or who doesn't produce.
I agree with this, Joe.
We've got the work ethic that says, you know, you're important only if you can produce in
good.
society.
You're
You're
good.
good.
That's
Right.
that's how you
That's
measure.
the hang up that you were talking about with our system.
But my hang-up resolves itself from the fact that we have observed people now to find out what does happen to them if you give them a guaranteed annual income. First, they don't stop working; they start working. Now they have time to take courses. Now they have the money to go out and do something. The work ethic is just, you know, such a hang-up thing with the poor as it is with the rich.
All right, but we've said, you know, by giving a person a guaranteed income, that they're important not for what they produce, but for who they are.
That's true.
And I think if we can switch our basis around to that, it will begin solving some problems. You're worth something because you're a human being.
That's right. Now, I tell you, poverty lawyers are progressing along a path which is going to lead us right to attempting to establish as a legal constitutional principle in this country that every human being in this country has a right to life. To wit, he has a right to expect of the society those things which enable him to exist and to survive and to live, irrespective of whether he contributes his just due in taxes, irrespective of whether he works at a job which technologically the society needs or doesn't need, and irrespective of the fact where he says, just give me my dough and I want to go off and do my thing, period.
Now, who's going to accept that?
Now, that's who here is going to accept that?
Right. Go ahead.
I'd like to know.
Who will accept it?
of the Indian in North America.
That's right. What about the Indian in North America?
Well, in the 19th century, they got a guaranteed annual income, and they were expected at the same time to go out and learn to farm. But their ethic is completely different, and they don't believe in working to put away for a rainy day. They don't have that ethic. They will work,
as they need, but they will not work for the sake of working.
She'll join you pushing.
Right. And what happens? What happens when they don't have? When the Indian doesn't have? What
no,
happens?
It's different. They don't have the guaranteed annual income.
No, but what happens with vis-a-vis other Indians? Do you know, as a part of Indian culture, what happens? They provide.
They share.
They share. That's exactly right. General relief for all Indians.
Go ahead.
We've been talking about the guaranteed income, all of these
Louder.
things. And you talked a little bit about getting your law students in. I talked to one of your law students today. I knew him from high school. I said, what are you doing down here? Oh, I'm getting down here with the people again. Oh, it's a good relaxation, it's a little break. What are you going to do next year? I'm going to go out and take a job, $15,000 a year. But I really like coming down here, a chance, once every 3 months, just to see how things are going. You talk about the obligation to help and the obligation to care. And this is, it seems to me, what it really gets down to. We can give the Indian the guaranteed income, all of these social services. But do we really care in the process? You can give them the guaranteed income, and it may work and it may not.
Sounds to me like it's sort of a religious thing we're talking about.
Right, that's what I'm worried about. That if we're going to get to that, I'm leaving. Really.
I'm not so sure why this is just such a problem with this social work issue that's brought up in a while. Because if some of you go to Stockholm and you go to Gamla Stan, which is the rotten part of Stockholm, relatively speaking, there is a Sweden. Yes, there is a big social work office, and it says it has all kinds of posters. And may we help you today? Is there any problem we can solve you? They are selling social work imaginatively, very well, and they are hauling people in the street, not by physically or because you have to come in, but people are actually there in lines to get in and have a problem solved. In other words, the market economy is suddenly working in the area of human concern and love, which is horrendous to me even as an economist. That means, however, that social work has justified its own position in society by being able to provide services that are in demand by people, and that's all they provide, the services that people need and demand. Now, that to me is much better than take the social worker from the paper shuffling and all the other means test business that they are engaged in right now. Let the economic part be out of the picture and let them focus on the problems which they are trained to solve. And let the people come in and demand it rather than having the social worker hold them in, and let the social worker sell it as a service to the people.
All right, now that's the system that is going to go in under the Title IV split in Hennepin County. Hopefully July 1st, 70, we'll see at any rate. Which means that total division between the distribution of money, which will not be handled by anything resembling a social worker, and services, which will be provided by social workers. Now, I don't know whether it'll be able to get it across. It'll take a while, obviously, to get across the fact that there is the separation, that the money isn't there in one hand if you take the services with the other hand, which really isn't true under the law, as a matter of fact, because I tell my clients, you don't want anything, you don't take it. If you don't want them out at your house, you don't let them come. You tell them to go to hell. I don't care if you tell them. You can even tell them that without worrying about being cut off. And it's, in fact, true under the law, although the 9 out of the 10 clients that I talk to don't believe that it's true. It is, in fact, true. Now, it's going to take a while. And it's also going to take an imaginative kind of response from the agency that is delivering this kind of service. If it's the same old stuff in a different cabinet, it's going to be found out pretty soon. If it's, why don't you pick yourself up and go down, do this and do that, and that kind of stuff, it's going to,
There's one mistake I like to kill before I give up, my crusade tonight. The first one is that this business about black capitalism. I said white capitalism ever solved anything. Black capitalism is essentially, it's not the antidote to white capitalism, but it is not going to solve the problem of poverty. Secondly, the fact that people are hung up on a work ethic means essentially that you are completely preoccupied with the supply side of the economy, the production side, providing of goods and services. Well, unless you have a demand side to take that off your hands, you're really running your head against the wall. It's a very well accepted economic dogma that unless you have demand, supply is worthless. So it means that because there is an AFTC mother down the block where you live, your job is that much more secure. And if she is off the rolls, you are likely to be out of work compared to the alternative of having her there. Now, every person who has taken Econ 1 and 2 knows this. It's a matter of economic literacy that's on the basis of all levels. You know, it goes back to 1936. Now, this kind of realization I thought was a big deal. You know, if everybody knew this, you know, there wouldn't be this kind of decision. That is not true. It is not a rational decision, and that was the greatest disappointment I had when I came. That you could deal with something rationally and show it on paper that it made money, and it made no impact whatsoever to the extent that it was an emotional issue. And I think it behooves us, you know, to line up behind the rational argument, the emotional arguments, to counteract the other emotional ones, because that's where you're going to have the balance hit.
Let me ask the girls back there for some more refreshing comments. Anything else? You have something?
I do have a question I'd like to ask. This lady right here mentioned this business about, you know, getting love into the system, and man over there said something about you gave money to the Indian, but do we really care? And your comment again about concern. It seems to me we need to, and also you commented that we have to be concerned about these people and show our concern. Well, it seems to me you are separating money from concern, which is fine with me, but what do you define as concern? How do you show this concern for your fellow man? Now, getting rid of the money aspect of it.
Well, there are all kinds of things you can do. It just depends on where you want to start.
I do it by
You can join amicus. You can become a professional, a lawyer. You can work part of your time.
Does this do something for the other person, or does this do something?
What's the difference? It does something for me. I enjoy my work to no end. I mean, my good days are when I can serve papers on somebody, and I know that's going to upset the apple cart. I mean, and when I put together a good theory, and I know I'm going to win, and I argue a good. I mean, I have a good day. I mean, I really enjoy it. So what? Do I have to flagellate myself and feel I'm doing something I really don't want to do to show my concern that I'm really concerned? I don't see why I have to separate the two. Can you tell me why?
Well, I didn't say anything about fledgling. I don't know where you pulled that out.
Well, that's what you're telling me. You're telling me if I enjoy it, if I have fun at it.
I think that in addition to what he said, in addition to him doing his thing, it's allowing another person to contribute too. He's saying, I like to contribute. It just happens what I contribute, I enjoy doing. And it's to let another person do the same thing. It's one of the things that troubles me about just giving and not giving the opportunity for a return. And that's something we need to build in as a follow-up to our program. And the other, our loving economists, I'm troubled today about population. And I was told that, for example, India is lost already. It's gone too far, cannot recover. The only thing that can possibly happen is that there's massive destruction by famine or war. Now, this country's population is growing too. And as I think about all the things we need to do that are positive and constructive, and how much it costs to do it, knowing that we have maybe 20, 30 years when the population is going to double and triple, how much time are we going to have to have the luxury of the moment? Aren't we going to be forced to everybody contribute pretty soon just to exist? What's the picture for us in this country?
This country is tremendously underpopulated. This country is nothing compared to Belgium or Holland or West Germany, any country. This country grows by 2% a year, which is nothing either. 35 years until it doubles. To this country, the human potential is one that enhances everybody's wealth and income by providing it. You know. What we foul up individually in towns like New York and Chicago, etc., is a problem of such minor proportions that whenever I hear Agnew or any of the other speakers, you know, on the overwhelming total threat that this represents, and think of Holland, think of Belgium, think of Germany, it's completely out of proportion to what the problems really are all about.
How many million can we support here at our present standard of living?
Well, you know, the more people you have, the higher the standard of living will become. The point reaches when you have the crowding aspects of the country. You know. I'm sorry I don't have a week for this, you know, because it's a very old dogma in economics that, you know, whoever presents 1% one with 2 pair of hands also presents somebody with a mouth, but the mouth doesn't eat as much as the 2 pair of hands produces. Ergo, there is a net gain. Okay, it always holds in a developed economy. Now, I can't, go into the detail. I think that it's a demographic question you're asking, but I cannot get impressed by the problem of, say, pollution and the other ones in regard to the problem of poverty, in regard to the problem of health, etc.
So the real danger is our neighbors who are undeveloped and falling behind.
Yeah.
They are going to be.
If you're going to rank your problem, for heaven's sake, start where the problems are.
Well, that's not quite right.
Well,
Washington D.C. already is faced with a catastrophic problem with the criminal. Washington D.C. is no longer safe. The President's Crime Commission said in its last report that if something isn't done about the core cities, that we are going to have ghettos in which people can. Well, in St. Louis and Chicago and New York, we already have them.
But that's what the problem
Yeah,
is.
but he's not saying he's not looking at it only in terms of the city. Obviously, there is a problem of concentration within a small area. But he's saying the country at large can clearly support many more, whereas some countries at large cannot do that. I take that.
Well, it's hilariously underpopulated. Even Norway is more populated than the United States.
Don't we pollute more per capita than a lot of those countries?
Pollution,
you
the
do
middle,
everything
the
more-
way out for the middle
everything
class who
more
doesn't
per
want to
capita.
really join with a real
Everything
fight.
in the world is
Next
more
time
per
I hear
capita.
pollution, down with pollution control.
Well, I think there's a movie at 11 o'clock. Isn't
Yeah,
there?
I want to make
All right. Well, anything else?
Be downstairs, directly below the room that's far on the stairs. So you go down the stairway, take a right, and another right. You're right there.